Have you ever wanted to escape the very place God was trying to bless you? Lily Reese did. She thought happiness was somewhere else, somewhere louder, bigger, richer than the dusty streets of her small town. But what if the miracle she was praying for was hidden inside the life she was trying to leave? Stay with me, because this story may change the way you see waiting, love, and God's timing. Welcome to the Blessed Christian Storyteller, a place where faith meets story and ordinary lives reveal extraordinary purpose. If you love deep Christian stories, historical romance, and journeys that remind us that God is never late, then subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and settle in, because this story is one you'll want to hear to the very end. Now, let me tell you the story of Lily Reese. Lily Reese was tired. Tired of Browning City, Iowa. Tired of the same faces, the same dirt roads, the same small conversations that never led anywhere. Tired of watching the sunrise paint the same barn red every morning. Tired of hearing Mrs. Hoffman gossip about the same scandals that weren't really scandals at all. Tired of the way everyone seemed content to live and die within 5 square miles. People called it a one-horse town. Lily called it a cage. She was 23 years old and she felt ancient. While her childhood friends had married local boys and settled into predictable lives of cooking, cleaning, and childbearing, Lily had kept herself apart. Not because she thought she was better, though some whispered that she did, but because she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more waiting for her. Something beyond the Iowa cornfields. Something beyond Sunday potlucks and quilting bees. Something bigger. Every morning she woke with the same ache in her chest, the quiet belief that her life was passing her by while the world moved on without her. She'd read about it in the newspapers that came through town 3 days late. Chicago, New York, San Francisco, cities where women wore fine dresses and attended theater performances. Cities where opportunity didn't depend on who your father was or how many acres your family owned. Cities where you could be someone. The desire burned in her chest like a coal that never quite went out. It kept her awake at night, made her irritable during the day, and turned her Sunday prayers into barely concealed pleas for escape. "God," she whispered one night, kneeling beside her narrow bed, "Oh, please, show me the way out. I'm suffocating here." She didn't know it then, but God was about to answer her prayer. Just not in the way she expected. Lily worked at the Browning City General Store, a cramped building that smelled of coffee beans, leather, and the perpetual dust that seemed to coat everything in Iowa. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid enough for her to save, and saving was everything. She kept her money in a tin box under a loose floorboard in her room. Money she'd been collecting for 3 years. Every penny counted. Every nickel brought her closer to freedom. 2 more months, she told herself as she counted the coins by candlelight. Maybe 3. Then I'll have enough for a train ticket and a few weeks' rent in Chicago. I can find work there. I can start over. But life, she would learn, has a way of unraveling even the most carefully laid plans. It started the day Ben Purcell rode into town. Lily first saw him on a Tuesday morning in late September. She was restocking shelves when the bell above the store door chimed, and she glanced up to see a man she didn't recognize, which was unusual in Browning City, where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were rare enough to cause gossip for weeks. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin that spoke of long days outdoors. His clothes were clean but worn, practical rather than fashionable. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, and when he removed it, Lily saw dark hair slightly too long and eyes the color of creek water after a storm, gray-blue and unsettlingly direct. He didn't look around nervously like most newcomers did, and he simply stood there hat in hand as if he belonged. "Can I help you?" Lily asked more sharply than she intended. The man's lips quirked into a small smile. "I hope so. Name's Ben Purcell. I'm looking for work, farm work, carpentry, anything honest. Heard in the last town that Browning City might have opportunities." Lily almost laughed. "Opportunities? In Browning City?" "You heard wrong," she said. "There's nothing here." "Nothing?" Ben's smile didn't fade. "Then what are you still doing here?" The question hit her like a slap. She felt her cheeks flush, felt the familiar anger rise. Anger at this town, at her circumstances, at this stranger who'd somehow asked the exact question she'd been asking herself for years. "That's none of your business," she said coldly. Ben held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "You're right. I apologize. I didn't mean to offend." He glanced around the store. "Truth is, I'm not just passing through. I'm looking to settle down, build something. I've been drifting too long." "Then you're a fool," Lily said. "There's nothing to build here." Ben studied her for a long moment, and Lily had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her sharp words to the desperation underneath. "Maybe," he said quietly, "or maybe I'm looking for something different than you are." Before Lily could respond, Mr. Patterson, the store owner, emerged from the back room. He was a jovial man in his 60s who treated everyone like family, which Lily found both endearing and suffocating. "Well, hello there," Mr. Patterson boomed. "New face in town. What brings you to Browning City, young man?" Ben introduced himself again, and within minutes Mr. Patterson had offered him a job doing repairs around the store and helping with deliveries. Lily watched in disbelief as the two men shook hands, sealing the arrangement. "You'll need a place to stay," Mr. Patterson said. "Mrs. Crowley has a room she rents out, clean, affordable, and she's an excellent cook. Lily here can show you the way, can't you, Lily?" Lily wanted to refuse. She wanted to tell Mr. Patterson that she had inventory to finish, customers to serve, anything to avoid spending another minute with this stranger who'd somehow unsettled her with a single question. But Mr. Patterson was already ushering them both toward the door, and Ben was looking at her with those storm-colored eyes, and she found herself nodding stiffly. "Fine," she said. Follow me." They walked in silence through the dusty streets. Lily kept her pace brisk, hoping to make the errand as quick as possible. But Ben kept up easily, his long strides matching hers. "You really hate it here," he said after a while. It wasn't a question. "I don't hate it," Lily replied automatically. Then she sighed. I don't belong here." "Where do you belong?" "Somewhere else. Anywhere else." She gestured vaguely eastward. "The city, Chicago maybe, somewhere with opportunities, with life, with what? With purpose." The words burst out of her before she could stop them. "Do you know what it's like to wake up every day knowing that nothing will ever change? That you'll live and die in the same place, with the same people, doing the same things? I want more than that. I want to matter." Ben was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "And you think you'll matter more in Chicago?" "I think I'll have a chance to find out." They'd reached Mrs. Crowley's boarding house, a tidy white building with a porch swing and flower boxes that somehow still bloomed despite the autumn chill. Lily knocked on the door, and within moments Mrs. Crowley appeared, a plump woman with kind eyes and flower on her apron. "Why, Lily dear, what a pleasant surprise. And who's this handsome young man?" Lily made the introductions quickly, explained Ben's need for a room, and stepped back as Mrs. Crowley ushered Ben inside with enthusiastic hospitality. "Thank you," Ben said to Lily before he disappeared through the door, "for showing me the way." Lily nodded curtly and turned to leave. "Lily?" She paused, glancing back. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Ben said, and there was something in his voice, not pity, not judgment, but something else, something that made her chest tighten uncomfortably. She didn't respond. She just walked away, back toward the general store, back toward her routine, back toward the life she was so desperate to escape. But as she walked, she couldn't shake the image of those storm-colored eyes, or the feeling that something had just shifted in her carefully ordered world. In the weeks that followed, Ben Purcell became a fixture in Browning City. He was everywhere, fixing the church roof, helping old Mr. Jensen repair his fence, delivering goods for the general store. He worked hard, spoke little, and somehow earned the trust of a town that was typically suspicious of outsiders. People liked him, and that irritated Lily more than she cared to admit. "That Ben is such a nice young man," Mrs. Hoffman said one afternoon while purchasing thread. "Polite, hard-working, and handsome too. Single, I hear. You should—" "I'm not interested," Lily cut her off sharply. Mrs. Hoffman raised her eyebrows. "I was going to say you should introduce him to your cousin Sarah. She's been looking for a husband." Lily felt her cheeks burn. "Oh, yes, of course." But the truth was, she'd been thinking about Ben Purcell more than she wanted to. Not romantically, she told herself firmly, but because he represented everything she was trying to escape. He was rooted, content, satisfied with small-town life, everything she wasn't. And yet there were moments, like the afternoon she found him in the store, building new shelves for Mr. Patterson. He worked with his sleeves rolled up, and she noticed the careful precision of his movements, the way he measured twice before cutting, the quiet satisfaction on his face when a piece fit perfectly. "You're good at this," she said before she could stop herself. Ben looked up, surprised. "Thank you. My father was a carpenter, taught me everything he knew before he passed." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He lived a good life, died knowing he'd built things that mattered, homes, churches, even a school. He used to say that what you build with your hands lasts longer than what you chase with your feet." Lily felt a flash of defensiveness. Some of us want more than building shelves in the middle of nowhere. Ben didn't rise to the bait. He just looked at her steadily. "And some of us have learned that nowhere is just another word for not where I expected." Before Lily could respond, the store bell chimed, and a group of customers entered. The moment passed, but the words stayed with her. Not where I expected. Was that what Browning City was? Not the destination she'd hoped for, but perhaps something else? She shook the thought away angrily. No, she'd spent too long planning, too long saving. She wouldn't let some drifter with a hammer and pretty words change her mind. But Ben Purcell, it seemed, wasn't done disrupting her life. It happened on a Sunday after church. Lily was walking home alone, as she usually did, when she heard shouting. She turned to see a group of children clustered near the creek, and one of them, little Tommy Henderson, no more than 7 years old, had fallen in. And the creek wasn't deep, but the current was strong from recent rains, and Tommy was small and panicking, his head bobbing under the water. Lily's heart seized. She couldn't swim well enough to help, and the other children were too young, too frightened. And then Ben was there. He must have been walking behind her, though she hadn't noticed. He didn't hesitate, didn't even remove his Sunday coat. He simply ran to the creek's edge and plunged in, moving through the water with strong, purposeful strokes. Within seconds, he'd reached Tommy, pulled him to the surface, and was carrying him back to shore. The boy was coughing, crying, but alive. Ben set him down gently, checked him over with practiced efficiency, and then wrapped him in his own coat. By then, adults had arrived. Tommy's mother, sobbing with relief, and Pastor Williams, and who'd been chatting with parishioners outside the church. "Thank God you were here, Ben," the pastor said, clapping him on the shoulder. But Ben's eyes found Lily's in the crowd, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, her standing safe and dry on the bank, him dripping wet and breathing hard, and between them a question neither had asked aloud. "What would you have done?" Lily felt something crack inside her. Not break, not yet, but crack. A small fissure in the armor she'd built around her heart. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Ben diving into the creek without hesitation, kept hearing his father's words. "What you build with your hands lasts longer than what you chase with your feet." "God," she whispered into the darkness, "I don't understand. Why did you bring him here? Why now? Wait, when I'm so close to leaving?" But God, as usual, didn't answer in words. He answered in the persistent image of storm-colored eyes and steady hands, and in the uncomfortable realization that maybe, just maybe, she was running from something more than a small town. Maybe she was running from herself. Autumn deepened into early winter, and with it came the first whispers. Lily heard them in the store, in fragments of conversation between customers who thought she wasn't listening. "Found something in the old Harrington property. Could be gold, they say. Been hidden since the Civil War." At first, she dismissed it as nonsense. Browning City was full of legends, buried treasure, hidden fortunes, lost inheritances. None of them ever amounted to anything. But then the strangers started arriving. They came in ones and twos, men with hard eyes and hungry expressions. They asked questions about the Harrington property, about old maps, about who owned what land. They stayed at Mrs. Crowley's boarding house, but kept to themselves, speaking in low voices and watching the townspeople with barely concealed suspicion. "I don't like it," Mr. Patterson said one evening as he closed up the store. "Those men aren't here for honest work. Lily agreed, but what troubled her more was Ben's reaction. She'd noticed him watching the strangers with an intensity that seemed out of character. His usual easy manner had been replaced by something harder, more alert. He'd started walking her home from the store each evening, though she hadn't asked him to. "You don't need to do this," she told him on the third night. "I know," he said simply. Then why?" "Because something's not right. Those men, I've seen their type before. They're looking for something, and they don't care who gets hurt in the process." "The gold?" Ben glanced at her sharply. "You've heard the rumors?" "Everyone's heard the rumors. But they're just rumors. There's no gold. There never was." "Maybe," Ben said, "but belief is sometimes more dangerous than truth." His words proved prophetic sooner than either of them expected. It was a Wednesday evening when everything changed. Lily was working late, doing inventory in the store's back room, when she heard the front door open. She glanced at the clock. Nearly 8. Mr. Patterson had left an hour ago, trusting her to lock up. "We're closed," she called out, stepping into the main room. 3 men stood inside. She recognized them as the strangers who'd been asking about the Harrington property. They weren't smiling. "Store hours are over," Lily said, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden racing of her heart. "You'll have to come back tomorrow." The tallest of the 3, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, stepped forward. "We're not here to shop, miss. We're here for information." "I don't know anything about the Harrington property," he interrupted. "We know the store keeps records of land sales, deeds, property transfers. We need to see them." "Those are private documents. I can't." "You can." His hand moved to his belt, where Lily saw the unmistakable outline of a gun. "And you will." Fear flooded through her, sharp and cold. Her mind raced. The records were in Mr. Patterson's office, locked in a cabinet. She had a key, but giving these men what they wanted felt wrong. Dangerous not just for her, but for the whole town. "I don't have access to those files," she lied. The man's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with us, girl. We've been watching. We know you work here. Know you have keys. Now either you open that cabinet or—" The front door crashed open. Ben stood in the doorway, and there was nothing gentle about him now. His jaw was set, his eyes hard, and in his hand was a rifle. "Step away from her," he said quietly. The 3 men turned, and Lily saw the calculation in their eyes. 3 against 1. But one was armed and stood between them and the door. "This doesn't concern you," Scarface said. "It concerns me plenty." Ben's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "You're threatening an innocent woman in my town. That makes it my concern." "Your town?" One of the other men laughed. "You've been here all of 2 months. This isn't your—" "I said step away." Something in Ben's tone made the men reconsider. Slowly they moved toward the door, keeping their eyes on Ben. "This isn't over," Scarface said as they left. "That gold is out there, and we're going to find it. Anyone who gets in our way will regret it." The door closed behind them, and for a moment the only sound was Lily's ragged breathing. Ben lowered the rifle and turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. Her whole body was trembling. Ben crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. And Lily, who'd spent years keeping everyone at a distance, who'd armored her heart against this town and everyone in it, Ona found herself clinging to him like a drowning woman to a lifeline. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you. You're safe." But even as she stood there, wrapped in his arms, Lily knew that nothing would be safe anymore. The danger had arrived, and something told her it was only just beginning. Pastor Williams called a town meeting the next evening. Nearly everyone in Browning City crowded into the small church, their faces worried and their voices low. The stranger's threat had spread quickly, and fear had taken root. "We need to handle this carefully," the pastor said from the pulpit. "These men are dangerous, and they believe something valuable is hidden on the Harrington property. Whether or not there's any truth to it, their belief makes them a threat." "We should contact the county sheriff," someone called out. "Yeah, already done," your Pastor Williams replied. "But he's 3 days away, and in the meantime, we need to protect ourselves and each other." Ben stood up. "We should organize watches, men to patrol at night, especially near the store and any homes on the outskirts of town. We keep our families inside after dark, and we don't travel alone." There were murmurs of agreement, and Lily watched as her neighbors, people she dismissed as simple, as stuck, as lacking ambition, came together with a quiet strength she'd never noticed before. Mrs. Hoffman offered to organize meals for the watch groups. Mr. Jensen, despite his age, volunteered for patrol duty. Young couples offered their homes as gathering places for women and children. Even Sarah, Lily's cousin, who Lily had always thought of as silly and frivolous, stood up and offered to teach basic first aid to anyone who needed it. This town that Lily had spent years trying to escape was suddenly revealing itself to be something different. Not a cage, a community. After the meeting, Ben walked Lily home again. The streets were dark, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked. "Thank you," Lily said quietly, "for last night, for everything." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Ben, why did you come to Browning City? Really?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "I told you I'd been drifting. That was true. But what I didn't say was why." He looked up at the star-scattered sky. "I spent years chasing something bigger. Left my hometown when I was 18. Yan worked in factories in Chicago, tried my luck in California, even spent time on a ranch in Montana. I kept thinking the next place would be the place where I'd finally feel like I mattered, like I was doing something important. And I was miserable, not because the places were bad, but because I was looking for something outside myself that can only be found inside. My father tried to tell me that before he died, but I was too young and too proud to listen." He smiled ruefully. "Took me 8 years and a lot of heartache to understand what he meant." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. What did he mean? That purpose isn't about where you are. It's about who you are and what you do with what you've been given. My father built homes in a small town, and he died satisfied. I worked on some of the tallest buildings in Chicago, and I felt empty. Ben reached out and gently took her hand. "When I came to Browning City, I wasn't looking for opportunity. I was looking for home, and I found it." "But how did you know?" Lily's voice broke. "How did you know this was the place?" "Because I stopped asking where I should go and started asking who I should be. And once I did that, this place made sense." Lily pulled her hand away, suddenly angry. Angry at him for making it sound so simple. Angry at herself for wanting to believe him. "That's easy for you to say. You chose to come here. I was born here. Do you know what it's like to watch everyone else have choices while you're stuck? You're not stuck, Lily. You have money saved. You could leave tomorrow if you wanted to. Then why haven't I?" The question exploded out of her, raw and desperate. "Why haven't I left? I've had enough money for months now, but I keep finding reasons to wait. One more month, one more week, one more..." She broke off, breathing hard. Ben stepped closer. "Maybe because part of you knows that running away isn't the same as moving towards something." "I'm not running away. Aren't you?" The question hung between them, and Lily felt the crack in her armor widen into a fissure. "I don't belong here," she whispered, but there was less conviction in her voice now. "Maybe you don't," Ben said gently, "or maybe you've never let yourself try." Before she could respond, a shout echoed through the darkness. They both turned toward the sound, and Lily's blood ran cold. Fire! Orange flames were rising from the direction of the Harrington property, visible even from here, painting the night sky in angry red. And somewhere in the chaos, she heard gunshots. By the time they reached the Harrington property, half the town was already there. The old barn was fully engulfed in flames, and silhouetted against the inferno were figures, the strangers, fighting with some of the town's men. Pastor Williams was shouting for order, Mrs. Crowley was pulling children back to safety, and somewhere in the chaos, Lily heard Ben's voice calling out commands. The county sheriff still hadn't arrived, and everything was falling apart. "They found something!" Mr. Jensen was yelling, his face streaked with soot. "Torna, the strangers. They found something in the barn and they're trying to take it." "What did they find?" someone shouted back. "I don't know, but they're willing to kill for it." Lily's mind raced. The gold. It was real. After all these years of rumors and legends, there actually was something hidden on this property, and people were going to die for it. She saw Ben moving toward the barn, saw him trying to pull one of the strangers away from Mr. Patterson, who was bleeding from a cut above his eye. The man swung at Ben, and they went down in a tangle of limbs. Lily didn't think. She just ran. She grabbed a wooden plank from the ground, a piece of the barn's fence that had broken off, and swung it at the stranger. It connected with a solid thud, and the man stumbled backward, giving Ben time to pin him down. "Who'll get the sheriff?" Ben shouted. "Someone ride to the county seat and get the sheriff now." Young Thomas Miller took off running toward the stable, and Lily heard the thunder of hoofbeats moments later. But the fire was spreading, and more of the strangers were emerging from the barn, carrying something heavy between them. A chest, old and battered, but unmistakably real. "Stop them!" Pastor Williams called out. But the strangers had guns, and no one wanted to die for treasure. Except Ben. He moved to block their path, and Lily's heart stopped. "Ben, no!" But he wasn't listening. He stood there unarmed now, his rifle lost somewhere in the chaos, and he looked at the strangers with the same steady calm he'd shown that first day in the store. "You can take the gold," he said clearly, his voice cutting through the noise. But you'll have to go through me first. And even if you do, you'll have to go through every person in this town. Is it worth it? Is any amount of gold worth that?" Scarface raised his gun, and Lily screamed. But Pastor Williams stepped forward to stand beside Ben. Then Mr. Patterson, despite his bleeding head. Then Mrs. Hoffman. Then Mr. Jensen. One by one, the people of Browning City, Lily's neighbors, the people she'd dismissed as simple and unambitious, stepped forward to form a wall between the strangers and their escape. And Lily, almost without realizing it, found herself stepping forward too. She stood beside Ben, her heart hammering, her hands shaking, but she stood. "This is our town," Ben said quietly, "and we protect what's ours." For a long moment, no one moved. The fire crackled behind them. The chest sat heavy in the stranger's hands, and the gun remained pointed at Ben's chest. Then in the distance, Lily heard it. Hoofbeats, many of them. The sheriff was coming. Scarface heard it too. His eyes darted from the townspeople to the approaching riders, and Lily saw the calculation happen in real time. "This isn't over," he snarled, but he was already backing away, already signaling his companions to drop the chest. They ran into the darkness, disappearing before the sheriff and his deputies thundered into the property. The barn collapsed with a groan of burning timber, and Lily, still standing beside Ben, felt something inside her collapse too. Not her strength, her resistance. The chest sat in Pastor Williams's office, opened under the supervision of the sheriff. Inside was gold, but not as much as the legends had promised. There were also old documents, letters, and a journal that told the story of a Confederate soldier who'd hidden his family's savings during the war, intending to return for it. He never had. "The gold will be split between the Harrington heirs and the town fund," the sheriff declared. "Anyone injured in tonight's incident will be compensated, and the rest will go toward building that school you've been needing." There were murmurs of agreement, but Lily barely heard them. She stood outside the church watching the sun rise over Browning City. The barn was nothing but ash now, and the smell of smoke still hung in the air. She thought about the gold, about how she'd spent years dreaming of wealth and freedom and purpose, and how tonight she'd stood in front of a loaded gun for a town she'd spent years trying to leave. "You did something brave tonight," Ben said, coming to stand beside her. "I did something stupid," Lily corrected, but there was no heat in her words. "I could have been killed. So could I, so could any of us. But we weren't. Why did you do it?" She turned to face him. "Why did you risk your life for a town you've only lived in for 2 months?" "Because it's home," Ben said simply, "and you fight for home." Lily felt tears spill down her cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I've spent so long planning to leave, so long convinced that happiness was somewhere else, and now I don't know what I want anymore." Ben reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Then maybe it's time to stop planning and start living. Not in some future city, not in some imagined life, but here, now, today. What if I make the wrong choice? What if there is no wrong choice? What if there's just the choice you make and what you do with it?" Lily closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw it all clearly for the first time. The city wasn't calling to her. Fear was. She'd been so afraid of being ordinary, of being forgotten, of not mattering, that she'd convinced herself the only way to be significant was to be somewhere else. But tonight, standing with her neighbors, protecting what was theirs, she'd felt more alive, more purposeful than in all her years of planning and saving. And when she opened her eyes and saw Ben looking at her with those storm-colored eyes full of hope and patience and something that looked a lot like love, she knew. "I'm not leaving," she whispered. Ben's face transformed, joy breaking across it like sunrise. "You're not?" "I'm not," she said more firmly. "I don't know what comes next, and I'm scared, and I still don't understand why God wants me here. But I'm staying." He laughed, surprised by the sound. When was the last time she'd laughed like that, free and unguarded and real? "My fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver," Ben murmured. Lily recognized the verse from Proverbs. "My mother used to quote that." "Mine too. I think they were trying to tell us something." "What?" "That the real treasures aren't the ones we chase. They're the ones we almost miss because we're looking somewhere else." Lily leaned against him, letting herself be held, and watched the sun climb higher over Browning City. The town didn't look different than it had yesterday. Same dirt roads, same simple buildings, same quiet streets. But she was different, and somehow that changed everything. 3 months later, Lily Reese married Ben Purcell in the same church where they'd first stood together against danger. She wore a simple dress, not the elaborate gown she'd once imagined wearing in some grand city ceremony, but something her mother had made, with lace from Mrs. Hoffman and pearls borrowed from Sarah. It was perfect. The whole town came to the wedding, and afterward, there was dancing in the street and a potluck that lasted until sunset. Lily laughed until her sides hurt, danced until her feet were sore, and somewhere between the fiddle music and the firelight, she realized something profound. She was happy, not the desperate, grasping happiness she'd imagined finding in Chicago, but something quieter, deeper, more real. The kind of happiness that came from belonging, from being known, from building a life instead of chasing a dream. "Any regrets?" Ben asked her as they danced, his hand warm and solid against her back. "Not a single one," Lily said, and she meant it. That night, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, just a week in Des Moines, nothing extravagant but theirs, Lily made one final stop. She climbed the stairs to her old room, knelt beside the loose floorboard, and pulled out the tin box. Her escape money, 3 years of saving, every penny counted. She looked at it for a long moment, remembering the girl who'd hidden it there, who'd believed that freedom could be purchased with coins and train tickets. Then she smiled, closed the box, and carried it downstairs. "What's that?" Ben asked. "A blessing," Lily said. She handed him the box. "I want to give it to the town fund, for the new school." Ben's eyes widened. "Lily, this is years of saving. You don't have to." "I know, but I want to. This money was supposed to buy my freedom, but you taught me that freedom isn't about leaving. It's about choosing where you stand and who you stand with." She took his hand. "I choose here. I choose us. Why I choose this life." Ben pulled her into his arms and she heard him whisper against her hair. "Thank you, not for the money, but for staying, for taking the risk." "Thank you for making me brave enough to try," Lily whispered back. Years would pass. The school would be built, a beautiful red brick building with tall windows and a bell tower. Children would learn there, including Lily and Ben's own 3 children, who would grow up hearing the story of the night their parents stood against danger and chose love over fear. The general store would expand, and Lily would eventually run it after Mr. Patterson retired. She'd keep the books, help her neighbors, and discover that serving a community was its own kind of purpose. Ben would build homes throughout Browning City and the surrounding towns, and people would say that his work was solid, built to last, just like his father's. And sometimes on quiet evenings, Lily would stand on her porch and watch the sunset paint the Iowa sky, and she'd think about the girl she'd been, the one who'd thought happiness was somewhere else. She'd been wrong. Happiness wasn't somewhere else. It was here, in the life she'd almost run from, in the place she'd thought was too small to contain her dreams. God hadn't been silent when she'd prayed for escape. He'd been preparing something better, something she couldn't see because she was looking in the wrong direction. The greatest treasure wasn't gold or cities or grand adventures. It was the quiet, steady love of a good man, the satisfaction of meaningful work, the strength of a community that stood together, and the profound joy of discovering that the life you thought was too small was actually exactly the right size after all. 40 years after that fateful night, an elderly Lily Reese Purcell sat in a rocking chair on her porch, watching her grandchildren play in the yard. Browning City had grown, not into a city exactly, but into something more than it had been. The school had expanded twice. New families had arrived. The church had been rebuilt with a proper steeple. But it was still small, still simple, still the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. And Lily loved it with a fierceness that would have shocked her younger self. Her granddaughter, also named Lily, climbed onto her lap. "Grandma, tell me the story again, about the treasure." Lily smiled, wrapping her arms around the child. "Which treasure, sweetheart? The gold or the real one?" "The real one," young Lily said immediately. "Well," Lily began, settling into the familiar rhythm of the story. "A long time ago, there was a young woman who thought she knew what she wanted. She thought happiness was far away, in places she'd never been, living a life she'd never tried. But God knew something she didn't." "What?" the girl asked, even though she'd heard the story 100 times. "That the treasure she was looking for was right where she was standing. She just had to learn to see it. And then she met Grandpa. Yes, she did. And he taught her something very important." "What?" Lily looked out over her land, her town, her life, and she felt the familiar rush of gratitude that had become her constant companion. "He taught her that my fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. He taught her that God's treasures don't always look impressive from the outside, but they're the ones that last. They're the ones that matter." Young Lily frowned, thinking, "So the real treasure was staying?" "No, sweetheart. The real treasure was learning to be still long enough to see what God was doing right where I was. The treasure was trust." Ben appeared in the doorway, older now but still solid, still steady. He looked at his wife and granddaughter with such love that Lily felt her eyes mist with tears, a common occurrence these days. "Story time?" he asked. "Story time," Lily confirmed. He settled into the rocking chair beside hers, taking her hand in his, work-worn, familiar, home. And as the sun set over Browning City, Iowa, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lily Reese Purcell closed her eyes and thanked God for the greatest blessing of her life. The courage to stay when everything in her wanted to run, the faith to wait when everything in her wanted to hurry, and the wisdom to recognize a treasure when it was disguised as ordinary life. Because sometimes the miracle we're praying for is hidden inside the life we're trying to leave. And sometimes God's answer to our prayer for escape is a gentle invitation to stay and discover that we've been standing on holy ground all along. Lily Reese discovered what many of us learned too late, that God's treasures are not always loud, not always fast, and rarely where we expect them to be. Her story reminds us that the ache for something more, the restlessness we feel, isn't always a call to leave. Sometimes it's a call to see differently, or to dig deeper, to trust that God is working even in the places that feel small and unremarkable. The gold that nearly destroyed her town became the funding for a school that educated generations. The love she didn't want became the foundation of a life she couldn't have imagined. And the place she thought was a cage became the very ground where she learned to fly. If this story spoke to your heart, if you've ever struggled between running away and standing still in faith, between chasing dreams and trusting God's timing, between believing you're stuck and discovering you're exactly where you need to be, then I invite you to like this video, to share it with someone who needs to hear it, and to subscribe to the Blessed Christian Storyteller. More stories are coming, stories of waiting, stories of love, more stories of ordinary people discovering that God's plans are better than their own, stories that remind us that sometimes the miracle we're begging for is already present. We just need eyes to see it. Until next time, stay blessed, keep trusting, and remember that the author of your story knows exactly what he's doing. Even when the plot doesn't make sense yet, even when you're tempted to close the book and write your own ending, keep reading, keep trusting, keep believing, Because the best treasures are often hidden in the places we almost leave behind. And God is never late. He's always right on time.